Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unraveling the absolute high-stakes reality behind Taiwan's fight for survival. We hear a lot about Indo-Pacific geopolitics on a macro level, but right now, we are zooming directly into the internal mechanics of an island caught in an unprecedented trilemma. It's this incredibly delicate balancing act between immense economic pressure, fierce domestic political battles, and a rapidly escalating military threat right on its doorstep. Let's get right into it.
Okay, look at this massive number, greater than 90%. Taiwan single-handedly churns out over 90% of the world's advanced AI chips. Literally, the smartphone in your pocket, the entire artificial intelligence boom, the future of global tech, it all hinges on this one single island. It is a level of global economic concentration that makes the stakes of what we're talking about today absolutely sky-high.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to hit 5 key areas. First, Taiwan's economic engine. Second, the defense dilemma. Third, a divided democracy. Fourth, cross-strait pressures. And we'll wrap up with, number 5, the path forward.
Let's kick things off with Part 1, Taiwan's economic engine, and how it's powering the AI era.
Now, Taiwan boasts a blistering 8.68% economic growth rate projected for 2026, and that is fueled almost entirely by tech giants like TSMC, just absolutely riding the global AI wave. But that massive strength masks a critical, glaring vulnerability. Taiwan imports 98% of its energy. 98%! Plus, this economic miracle is super concentrated, which leaves traditional sectors struggling and wage growth essentially stagnant for the average citizen. So we're looking at a booming economy for sure, but a profoundly vulnerable one.
And that terrifying vulnerability brings us to Part 2, the defense dilemma, and what we're calling the 10% shockwave.
Check out this jaw-dropping quote. During a 2025 confirmation hearing, U.S. Undersecretary of Defense for Policy nominee Elbridge Colby flat out argued that Taiwan should spend 10% of its GDP on defense. 10%. To put that into perspective for you, the United States only ever reached those kinds of levels during the absolute heights of the Korean and Vietnam Wars. This really puts that demand into stark relief. Jumping from their current spending of 2.45% up to President Li's ambitious goal of 5% by 2030 is already going to be incredibly difficult. But forcing a jump all the way to 10%, economically speaking, that is practically impossible under current conditions.
What we are really talking about here is the ultimate guns versus butter showdown. See, Taiwan operates with a really lean tax-to-GDP ratio of just 14.7%. Hitting that 10% defense target wouldn't just mean tweaking a few spreadsheets, it would literally require defunding major domestic social welfare and healthcare programs. I mean, you can just imagine the total domestic outrage that would spark among voters who rely heavily on those everyday services.
Which drags us right into a fierce political battleground in Part 3. A divided democracy and the resulting legislative gridlock.
Inside Taiwan's legislature right now, there is an intense tug-of-war going on. On one side, the ruling DPP is pushing hard for massive deterrent spending, proposing an unprecedented $40 billion special defense budget to rapidly arm the island. But on the flip side, the opposition coalition, the KMT and the TPP, have completely slammed the brakes. They're refusing to hand over what they're calling an opaque, blank check for defense, arguing instead for fiscal accountability, long-term stability, and de-escalation.
But here's the thing, the opposition isn't just some unified monolith. Look at these incredible internal fractures. You've got KMT chairwoman Cheng taking a highly controversial mission to Beijing to push for institutionalizing peace and a much smaller, scaled-down $12 billion budget. But at the exact same time, the party's moderate wing, led by Taichung Mayor Liu, took an 11-day trip to the U.S. specifically to signal deterrence, because the centrists realized that completely blocking defense spending isn't just risky for security, it's a massive electoral liability with the Taiwanese public.
So what happens? Well, after 6 grueling months of gridlock, they finally hammered out a razor-thin compromise in May 2026. They passed a landmark $25 billion budget. But, as you can see, to get there, they had to mercilessly slash $15 billion from the original request. They found the political middle ground? Sure, but it definitely came at a massive strategic cost.
Because those budget cuts, they weren't just moving numbers around on a page. They completely gutted critical domestic innovations. The Strongbow anti-ballistic system, which is the core of their air defense, was scrapped entirely. Vital domestic drone initiatives were zeroed out. All of this leaves Taiwan heavily reliant on buying foreign hardware, completely undermining their goal of building a self-sufficient porcupine defense strategy to fend off saturation strikes.
That reliance leaves them really exposed, which perfectly segues into Part 4, cross-strait pressures, or the macro squeeze.
Just consider this chaotic sequence of events from May 2026. It's a total domino effect. On May 8th, Taiwan finally passes that hard-fought $25 billion budget. But literally just a week later, U.S. President Trump suggests that U.S. arms sales to Taiwan could be used as a negotiating chip with Beijing. And then boom, on May 21st, the U.S. Navy unexpectedly pauses a massive $14 billion arms sale to prioritize munitions elsewhere. So right at the exact moment Taiwan fully commits to buying American arms, the reliability of that supply chain comes seriously into question.
And all the while, the People's Liberation Army is turning up the heat. They deployed the Liaoning aircraft carrier group straight into the Western Pacific to practice blocking external intervention. But what's really alarming is this tactical shift. The PLA is taking hundreds of ancient 1950s-era J-6 fighter jets, converting them into pilotless suicide drones, and positioning them at bases right near the strait. The goal is simple, to just completely swarm and overwhelm Taiwan's expensive air defenses.
To make matters even more chaotic, China is utilizing some crazy, invisible cognitive warfare. They are literally broadcasting fake ship signals, a tactic known as AIS spoofing, directly into regional ports like Manila and Taiwan's own Tamsui Harbor. They are making ghost ships appear on radar to totally blind, confuse, and overwhelm the region's early detection systems. It's a brilliant, highly disruptive gray zone tactic.
So where do we go from here? That brings us to our final section, Part 5, the path forward, and building a durable consensus.
The administration in Taipei is facing an immense optical nightmare. Look, to survive modern asymmetric warfare, you desperately need advanced command, control, and communication software, the C4 systems. But let's be real, it is incredibly difficult to sell the voting public on spending billions of dollars for invisible software networks when what voters actually want to see are big, shiny physical ships and submarines protecting their waters. To the public, it just looks like the money is disappearing into a black hole, which feeds right back into the political gridlock we talked about earlier.
So I want to leave you with this explosive, burning question. How can all parties involved stop the blame game and finally build a durable, rock-solid public consensus for defense? Because whether it's through massive public messaging campaigns, strategic compromises, or just some harsh economic reality checks, a solution has got to be found before the clock completely runs out. That is going to do it for this explainer. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the numbers and the narrative shaping our world, and I will catch you in the next one.